Good evening. So before I begin, and you think my parents played a sick joke calling me Duke Stump as a kid, I'm going to tell you something that I haven't told a lot of people. So I've been bending the rules since third grade. My real name is Scott. But in third grade, there was 3 to 5 Scotts in the class, and the teacher said, "Hey, please pick a nickname. This is way too confusing." So in my infinite wisdom, I went home and I watched Gilligan's Island. And there was this Tarzan surfer dude who washed ashore named Duke. So I came home and I told my parents, "Hey, I've changed my name." And they were like, "What?" I said, "Yeah, my middle name's Thorson." I said, "I'm Duke O'Thorson." And they were like, "What?" So that was my whole ploy to get them to embrace Duke. So Duke Stump kind of stuck. So Bend is a home of incredibly bright and brilliant people. Yes. Yes, I lived in Portland. I used to come here for sun breaks. But what I'm actually going to ask you, I'm going to ask a favor. I want everybody for the next 10 to 15 minutes to do one thing. I want you to quiet your cleverness. Okay? I want to just pretend that life's a white canvas and we don't really know much right now. And we're going to look at new possibility from a completely different lens. And so let's start with a burning question. Actually, for me, it's not an obsession, it's an intoxication. Let's ask ourselves, hey, in life, why is untapped potential untapped? Why is it that certain students or cultures or people flourish and others tend to languish? Is one better than the other? Well, I actually have a premise, and it starts with a couple things. First is this. I'm not a researcher. I'm not a scientist. I'm actually an observer and a participant, I think, in life. And I really try to embrace kind of new thinking or thinking that I find resonant. And it started for me at an early age. I actually think I won the Powerball of parents. I grew up in a world without fences, literally and figuratively. I had a dad who just was brilliant. He didn't tell me answers. He gave me a lot of questions. Which to this day, I just truly admire. He was a man who demanded an honest work ethic, honesty, and arguably one of the most compassionate guys I know. My mom is, if you look under optimism and possibility and resilience in the dictionary, I'm pretty sure my mom would be in there. I always joke, the news could come, hey, a meteor's going to hit the earth, and there's maybe 5% chance we're going to make it. And my mom would be the person who'd be like, God, there's a 5% chance that we're going to make it. And so they really, I think, encouraged me with a sense of possibility. And I really was allowed to create. The other thing as a kid is I grew up on a farm in my early youth, and a farm out in Illinois. And it was interesting. There was no neighbors. I didn't have a friend for miles. That's probably my excuse. I probably didn't have a friend, frankly. But it was interesting. So imagine I'm on this farm by myself. I think in today's term, they call it boredom. But for me, it was like, wow, I just can be creative and imaginative. But most importantly, I can be curious. And so I just always remember that youth. And it really is transferred for me. I mean, I have had the most unorthodox career path. But for me, it's about, I got to love what I do, love the people I'm doing with, be really uncomfortable, and just build and create stuff. So Untapped is a story about possibility, but the mentors are not what we traditionally have learned. The mentors are a tree, which is really, for me, Biomimicry 3.8, a horse, which is horsemanship, so think horse whisperer. By the way, they really don't whisper to horses. If you do that, that's not really a cool thing. Buckminster Fuller, and a nun, Sister Corita Kent, who thought there was really cool nuns out there. So Biomimicry 3.8, in the late 90s, I was reading Janine Benyos's book, Biomimicry, and I was at night, and I remember reading, I'm like, God, this feels so rational. I mean, think about this. For 3.8 billion years, nature's flourished. And so why would we not want to somehow mimic what nature's doing? And I guess, we hadn't quieted our cleverness, so we had all the answers. And so I went from Nike to seventh generation, and I asked Janine and a dynamic co-founder of Biomimicry 3.8, Dana Baumeister, to come out, and we did this workshop. And I'll never forget this. We were at this beautiful reserve out in Vermont. And she said, okay, we're going to go for a hike. And I was like, oh, this is going to be amazing. So before there was a path maybe 10 feet in front of us. And I said, all right, let's go. I'm like, in 10 minutes, I'm going to find my Thoreau moment, and it's going to be amazing. And so we walked 2 steps, and Janine stops. And she's like, what do you see? And I'm like, I don't see anything. I see a tree, a bush, a flower. And in those 10 minutes, she shared with me a life's journey around life's principles. I literally got a lesson on life. I mean, nature is about creating the conditions conducive to life. And it's simple things, right? So we talked about building from the bottom up. We talked about optimizing versus maximizing. We talked about decentralized and distributed. We talked about self-organizing. And so as I was listening to that, and up until this point, biomimicry is primarily around designing new products, I was fixated on, man, like what if culture, what if our human behavior, parenting, in a company, in sports, what if it was like that? What if we self-organized? That would create a culture of trust. That'd be pretty cool. I mean, TEDx is the embodiment in many ways of a lot of life's principles, especially about building from the bottom up and self-organizing. So once again, this ability to kind of learn from different things, but I'm going to let you in a little secret. We love comfort, right? And happiness. You know what nature loves and why it thrives? There's mutation. There's disruption. But we somehow think of disruption as this really bad thing. So, yeah, it's easy for people to say, hey, you need to adapt and you need to evolve. You're like, yeah, but wait, how do I do that? Well, nature is locally attuned. It has an understanding for the essence of things around it. There's a strong sense of collaboration. So, a few examples. The Beatles are arguably the world's greatest band. I think they've sold over 1 billion units, okay? So if I looked at the 1964 Hard Day's Night album, they got their mop crew and their tailored suits. 3 years later, they come out with Sgt. Pepper's. So what was happening there? What, I couldn't hear it, but LSD, yes, LSD. That is the answer. If Steve Jobs was alive today. So everybody, just lick the paper in front of you and you're going to love this talk. No, LSD. Yes, LSD. No, but my point is they were locally attuned and they really understood the essence of their environment. So when it came time to evolve, it was from a place of confidence. Horses don't care how much you know. They want to know how much you care. I mean, they are an amazing, amazing mentor. This actually is Buck Brenneman, and this picture is from a friend, Cindy Meal, who created this incredible documentary called Buck. And if you haven't seen it, and you're not a horse person, you have to see it because it's a horse movie about people. And horses are a mirror into your soul. And what do I mean by that? Actually, let me take a quick step back. A couple weeks ago, I have 2 amazing daughters. One's 13, one's 11. So a 13-year-old daughter, a lot of crazy things going on right now in my life. And so I had this moment, and I was like, I thought I was really parenting in the best way, and then my daughter left, my wife looked at me like, what are you doing? And I was like, oh, no, I'm doing the right thing. And then what I realized was, just like a horse, it's a mirror into your soul, and sometimes you don't like what you see. The reflection for me was, I really wasn't parenting in the right way. I didn't understand the essence and the connection of my daughter. So once again, the learning from connection and the essence and the understanding that comes from horsemanship can be invaluable. Buckminster Fuller, which I'm actually thinking right now, like maybe I should have gone with Buck instead of Duke. I would Buck Brenneman, Buckminster Fuller. I could have been somebody. Buckminster Fuller, for me, the Da Vinci of our time, arguably was one of the first biomimetics that really was in our generation or in the last century, incredible, bright, brilliant individual. And he offered up a number of principles, but one in particular for me I actually love, and it's this whole notion of dare to be naive. And Oregon has an amazing sense of people, but one of the people I really admire is Dan Wyden. And he has this cultural comment or thing to ponder for everybody there is, how do you walk in stupid every day? And that's really a brilliant thought. Because as humans right now, and I find myself, trust me, this is a discipline, and I think I fail 7 out of 10 times, but we want to give answers, right? But then I think back to my dad, and my dad wasn't about answers, he was about questions. You know, a few years ago I was teaching, and I don't know how I got into teaching, but I somehow did that. And I just remember everybody wanted the answers. And I just oh, don't give them answers. Like, it wasn't about that. And so I think the notion for us to dare to be naive, Janine Benyos is the one, by the way, who kind of phrased this whole notion of quieting your cleverness. And I think the abundance that comes from that is immense. And so once again, the ability for the art of inquiry to penetrate our lives versus the art of answers. And lastly, Sister Corita Kent. I mean, think about this, 60s, 70s, you got a charismatic nun who's an artist, an activist. That's pretty cool, actually. Hanging out with Eames and Warhol. And Buckminster Fuller actually went to her design class one time at the Immaculate Heart in college. And he said it was one of the most fascinating experiences of his life. Which I'm actually not religious, but I think if Sister Corita Kent was somehow in my life, I probably would deeply jump into it. But I think what's pretty cool is she had, once again, a bunch of golden rules. And I'm going to share two. The first one is number 10, which I think is pretty interesting given the theme here. But this notion of we're breaking all the rules, even our own rules. I just love that. You know, as parenting, I find that all the time. I feel like, oh, I got it. And then I'm like, oh my God, I don't got it. I got to go somewhere else. But that's amazing, an amazing thing. The other thing, though, which I really love, and I think what's interesting in our culture, we're obsessed with winning. And I'm a competitive guy. I played sports, and I'll share a personal story here in a second. But I don't think we allow people to work from a place of inspiration enough. I think so often it's desperation. You know, in sports, for me, it's the analogy. You can play not to lose, or you can play to win. And those are two totally different behaviors. But right out of college, I went over to play hockey in Sweden, and I know I don't look like a hockey player. But I wasn't a great player. I was a good player. And so I flew over to Sweden. I was playing pro hockey. And before I get a huge head, pro hockey in Sweden for me was $10,000, a studio apartment, and a broken-down Saab. So that was kind of like the illustrious life. But I get there, and this coach, and I fly into Arlanda Airport in Stockholm, and I see the team practicing because they just started camp, and I'm like, oh my God, I don't even recognize this game. This is crazy. And the coach comes over, and he was a disciple of this, the godfather of Russian hockey, Anatoly Tarasov. And he said, listen, here's what I want you to create, because I was just playing up and down. I was doing everything safe. And he's like, no, I want you to create. And then I tried something and would mess up. He's like, wonderful, create. Every time I came to the bench, you know, I'm thinking, God, I messed up. He's like, wonderful creation. And I just remember the feeling of that for me was like, wow, the permission slip to create is so empowering. And my dad even came in December of that year, and in European hockey, you've got like every logo known to man all over your uniform. And my name was somewhere in the back. My dad said, man, I would have never recognized you if you didn't have your name in the back. You're a completely different player. And that was just in 4 months. But the ability and the permission slip to create was just, for me, incredibly liberating. So I'll close with this. The next time you see a tree, next time you see a horse or a dome or a nun, I hope you kind of say, I'm going to quiet my cleverness and not look at what is, but potentially what could be. Thank you for letting me bend some rules.